Okay, everyone, welcome back. I hope you had a good lunch and had lots of opportunities to speak to colleagues. It's wonderful to welcome Emma Howard-Boyd to our annual forum. Thank you, Emma, for joining. Emma is the chair of the Environment Agency. She's also the chair of the CGFI Advisory Council and the interim chair of the Green Finance Institute. She was also on the Green Finance Task Force that recommended the creation of both those organisations, and she has been a champion of green finance and greening finance in a number of different roles. I suspect there might be some additional roles coming up, maybe. But Emma, thank you so much for joining us and offering to give a keynote. Over to you.
Thank you, Ben, for that kind introduction. The United Nations' latest interconnected disaster risks report analysed 10 disasters that took place in 2020-2021. These included the Amazon wildfires, the Arctic heat wave, the winter storms in Texas, and Cyclone Amphan, among others. Disasters were selected for their representation of larger global issues which have changed or will change our lives across the world. It said, the three most commonly identified root causes shared between these 10 events are human-induced greenhouse gas emissions, insufficient disaster risk management, and undervaluing environmental costs and benefits in decision-making. In England, we know that this century we are likely to see 40-degree heat during the summer, but developers don't have to mitigate against that, not now nor at any point in the future. The Institution of Civil Engineers survey, What Makes Good Design, said the most limiting factors to progress on reducing greenhouse gas emissions and climate adaptation are that it's not part of the project brief, which might save on immediate costs, but while the short-term rewards are narrowly distributed, the long-term damage is societal. In May, the Bank of England published its first climate stress tests. They showed that UK banks and insurers will end up taking on nearly £340 billion worth of climate-related losses by 2050 unless action is taken to curb rising temperatures and sea levels. Such action will require collaboration between the public and private sectors. But around the world, just 5% of climate finance goes towards resilience. Virtually none of that comes from the private sector. The UK's 2021 National Infrastructure and Construction Pipeline sets out plans for nearly £650 billion of public and private infrastructure investment by 2030. The Infrastructure and Projects Authority has analysed over 200 billion of this up to 2024-25. For the equivalent period, England has about £3 billion of public money allocated to flood and coastal defences. By comparison, this looks like a thin green line of defence. Last year, the Environment Agency completed the government's £2.6 billion 6-year capital flood programme on time and on budget. It means that 700 flood schemes are better protecting more than 300,000 homes, nearly 600,000 acres of agricultural land, thousands of businesses and major pieces of infrastructure. The government has upped the budget of the new programme to a record £5.2 billion. And we know this investment works. In February, the UK's Met Office named 3 major storms in 1 week for the first time. Sadly, 400 homes flooded, but 50,000 properties were better protected. The Environment Agency delivers infrastructure that provides resilience to climate change. But to avoid financial climate chaos, we need all infrastructure to be more resilient. Businesses and public sector organisations should be encouraged to assess their climate risks and develop plans in response. If a local council is approving investment in new housing or roads or a shopping centre, they must demand that climate resilience runs through the veins of the project. In its progress report to Parliament last week, The Climate Change Committee recommended DEFRA expand the list of organisations reporting under the adaptation reporting power to ensure comprehensive coverage of critical infrastructure and services, such as canals and food supply chains. Regulation is part of the answer. Environmental regulation must work in lockstep with financial regulation and economic regulation to ensure incentives and penalties have enough clout to drive change. Today, green finance can help us go further to support regulated businesses to improve. Investor interest in environmental, social and governance practices, or ESG, widens the scrutiny of companies' environmental performance, and it provides a growing financial incentive for innovation. But as the market for environmental benefits crosses an inflection point, it is exploitable. In February, I spoke at the National Farmers Union about how farmers are particularly vulnerable to schemes that promise to monetize activities like carbon offsetting when we have no widely agreed standards to ensure they are paid fairly. The danger to us all is even more widespread greenwash. If we fail to identify and address greenwashing, we allow ourselves false confidence that we are already addressing the causes and treating the symptoms of the climate crisis. Greenwash makes it more likely that we won't realise this deception until it is too late. Companies that believe their own greenwash are embedding liability, storing up risk for their investors. NGOs like Share Action, Make My Money Matter and Client Earth must be applauded for their tireless work to call this out. And the government's work on a green taxonomy begins to address this. Providing frameworks and legislation for sustainable disclosure allows everyone to compare like for like and make informed choices. The more businesses are transparent about their plans to transition to net zero and prepare for climate shocks, the easier it is to benchmark best practice, set standards, and celebrate the companies that really are delivering on their commitments. The Centre for Greening Finance and Investment is leading by example through targeted research projects to support green finance analytics. And the Green Finance Institute designs, develops and facilitates portfolios of scalable financial solutions that accelerate sector-specific transitions to a low-carbon future. I also believe the future lies in some form of adaptation standards. More work is needed to develop a strategic approach to managing climate risks. Presently, we do not know what the optimum level of investment is for UK climate adaptation or how this should be balanced between the public and private sectors. The government could begin to address this by asking the Treasury to commission a review to assess the economics of resilience. This work would be like the 2021 Dasgupta review into the economics of biodiversity. It could consider the costs and benefits of resilient investment, both nationally and by economic sectors, what trajectory that investment should follow, and the appropriate balance between public and private investment. This would help us understand how preparedness for climate shocks supports sustainable economic growth. It would help to establish an overarching ambition for adaptation investment and a plan to achieve it. As with the government's ambition for net zero by 2050, delivering on climate resilience and nature recovery requires robust, consistent and trusted data. Earlier this year, the Chancellor's letter to the UK Infrastructure Bank sent an important signal about the direction of travel. It said it is important that the UK Infrastructure Bank explores projects that make the UK's infrastructure more resilient to climate change and better adapted to future risks. More broadly, climate risk, including the impact of climate change on financial assets, should help to inform the bank's decision-making. I want to congratulate the UK Infrastructure Bank on its strategic plan out last month, and I'm pleased to see that Nigel Topping, the UK's high-level climate action champion, who launched the race to resilience ahead of COP26, has been appointed to the board alongside 3 others. There is growing evidence of a compelling case for using nature-based solutions alongside or instead of traditional infrastructure. The Environment Agency and the Green Finance Institute, through its pioneering GFI Hive initiative, have been working with others to show how this makes money. Nature-based solutions provide cost-effective adaptation. For example, natural flood management can also deliver net zero benefits in the form of carbon capture. In May, along with DEFRA, Natural England and the GFI, we announced the second round of projects funded through the Natural Environment Investment Readiness Fund. The fund provides grants of up to £100,000 to help organisations develop projects to the stage where they can demonstrate a return on investment. One of the 4 pilot schemes is the Wyre Natural Flood Management Project. This reduces flood risk to downstream communities. Over several years, interventions in the Wyre catchment will include wetland creation, leaky barriers, sloped embankments, alongside peatland and river restoration. It uses a new financial model which will see the upfront investment repaid through contracts with organisations that benefit from improvements, including water and insurance companies. It is also the first environmental project eligible for social investment tax relief, which was brought in by the government in 2014 with the aim of encouraging investment in social enterprises. The use of social investment tax relief was successful in helping to bring in high net worth investors to the Wyre project. A similar style of environmental investment tax relief would be a possible incentive worth exploring in the Green Finance Strategy 2.0. Once we have established the financial models that work, we can scale them up at pace. Today, I've talked about how finance can help address the climate crisis. The Green Finance Strategy 2.0 is an opportunity to help set the frameworks for more integration between resilience, reducing emissions, and restoring nature. But success depends as much on how we choose to operate as it does on financial instruments. Halfway through COP26, people in Boston, Lincolnshire, were protected from the highest tide of the year by the newly opened Boston Barrier. The Thames and Hull barriers were also operating. The Boston Barrier scheme is estimated to deliver over £1.4 billion in economic benefits to the town and surrounding area by encouraging investment, improving resilience and well-being, and by protecting historic assets. This is important, but I want to talk about how the team did it. Since the scheme's inception, almost £10 million has been invested in the local economy by using local suppliers where possible. The barrier, designed by a gender-balanced team, was also the first major construction project where we mapped work against the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. The barrier was also made with 14,000 tonnes of low-carbon concrete. That's 90% of the weight of the whole structure. The learning from this will help us and others all over the world to steer large and small infrastructure projects that reduce emissions, help society, and drive economic development. We need to promote such choices, not only so my dedicated colleagues and their partner organisations get credit for their leadership, but so we can help investors properly understand the value of preparing for climate shocks and building more resilient communities. In finance, the importance of disclosure and data cannot be underestimated. But now we need to use disclosure and data as a launchpad for deals and delivery. Thank you very much. And then I'm afraid I have to disappear to another meeting. Right. You heard a lot about it in the media and in the press earlier on today. So thank you for this opportunity, Ben. I hope the rest of the conference goes well.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you for finding the time. So we're now moving into the afternoon. We are firmly in the afternoon. We have 2 sets of parallel sessions now. So if you're interested in, I'm sure you're all interested in nature, but some of you will be going down to listen to the Innovate UK pitches, which are in the lecture theatre downstairs. But if you want to stay for the nature finance session, it is up here. There'll then be a coffee break, and then, as I said at the beginning, we have a resilience finance session again here, and further Innovate UK sessions downstairs. I suggest for the people that are here for this session that they try and come up a bit to the front now that we've had a few people leave, if that's okay. And I think there's a bit of AV setting up that still needs to be done, so we'll start in a couple of minutes and I'll hand over to the chair of that session. So just bear with us.